right, welcome everybody. Welcome back, rather, everybody, to part 2 of our diversity and inclusion in the Latin classroom series for the lovely people at Cambridge. It's me again. It's John Bracey, aka Magister Bracey, coming at you here again with the most decorated human being ever to come out of the state of Louisiana, teaching out of Texas, the legendary Jenn John.
Hi, thank you so much. I think General Honore might beat me for most decorated Louisianan, but I'll take it.
I don't know about that. I think I kind of nailed it the first time.
Awesome.
So, no
Hi,
modesty.
thank you for joining us.
Yeah. All right, so let's get right into it. So today's topic is how to assess. The first video was all about when to assess, right? And so today we're going to show you exactly what we do to assess that allows for all types of students, all types of learners to be successful in our classes. And so, Jenn Charnigan, nice to see you. You are a master of assessment. What kind of assessments do you do in your classes that work for all types of students? What do you got?
So I'll start with something that's super important. I know whenever you hear types of assessments, if you're like me, your brain goes to the more summative ones, tests, quizzes, projects, things that traditionally kids either study for or prepare for, or that are like a capstone in some way. But before we even talk about that, one of the simplest ways to just do a quick formative, are people understanding, is I just tell them, I'll tell students, like, make eye contact with me if you don't feel like you quite understand it. And then, some kids will they can just sort of look up, they can look down. And if they're looking right at you, okay, I need to go back over this a little bit. That's a very low stakes. It's not raise your hand if, it's not let me know verbally if, so no one really feels on the spot. And it's not something where any other kid can look over and see. It's a very it's an easy way to do a one-on-one kind of thing without having to get into like writing a Google form and dealing with all of that, or being overly techie. You don't always have to be techie to kind of do these sorts of things, which is good. So that was a quick one. In terms of how I assess in a more like what we tend to think of when we do assessments, with younger grades, I really love to use images, or in earlier stages, I might use an image and have students tell me what you see in the picture in Latin. So obviously when they're starting, it's words. And become sentences. It might eventually become a paragraph, which is really nice. That's one of the simplest, especially if you pick a picture where there's a lot of different types of things you could say. It gives room for multiple right answers. It gives a lot of opportunities for students to demonstrate what they know, and it doesn't get into any sort of gray area of, if a kid might have known 10 things about the picture, but you only ask them about one thing, then you're it's not really reporting what they know that accurately. I might sometimes give them a requirement, try to tell me 3 to 5 things about what's going on in the picture, and that can kind of avoid the one word answer over and over again kind of a thing. I'm also a big fan of using vocab quizzes where I'll give a sentence and I bold and underline the word in the sentence that I want them to translate in the context of the sentence. So thinking about whether it's singular or plural, thinking about the tense of the verb, thinking about the person of the verb, but they're not having to write out the whole thing. And that really helps see what they can do in context. Let's say a typical vocab quiz might be 15 to 20 words, right? Mm-hmm. So 20 sentences, they don't write out the whole sentence. They do the word I bolded in the sentence. Sometimes what I'll do though is they can write out the translation of up to 5 sentences. Okay. For a little bit of I don't use the term extra credit, but to sort of get some points back. Or if you're not 100% sure you've used this one word exactly right, give me the whole sentence and I can kind of see where you're at and what's going on. I think it's important to give kids a cap, like 5 or 3 or something, because you have some students who will become so invested in writing out the whole thing that it eats up their time and they worry about it instead of just boom, 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 move on. So giving a type of a limit or a cap can kind of give kids the parameters you're looking for. And it's a good way to get some extra information from kids. Because they might have left 5 blank because they didn't remember those words, but they could translate some other sentences. We'll talk more about how I grade that sort of thing in our next video when we talk about grading and feedback. The next type, I would say, those are really the most common. Same idea if I'm assessing a particular grammar feature, like if we are working on tenses. For example, I use Cambridge Latin course. Kids learn the imperfect and the perfect at the same time. I might give them sentences and say, underline every verb that's in the imperfect tense, circle every verb that's in the perfect tense, pick 2 sentences that have each type of verb and translate them. And that way they get to choose which sentences that they translate. It's not translate all of the things. They're showing me they can identify the different tenses. They kind of can get a sense of that. Things that you can do fairly quickly, things that aren't going to eat up a whole lot of time. That's of course a lower level when you're first working on something and it's really about being able to identify it as opposed to sort of mastering how to use it or how to write in that tense or something. But those are probably my 2 biggest go-to types of assessments, the ones that I use most often as we progress through our language learning.
Good. All right. Lots of good stuff in there. Lots of good stuff in there. Yeah, lots of opportunities, lots of room to lots of room to show off what you know, and it's focused more on what you know versus trying to catch you on what you don't know and giving you all of that room to be able to express what it is you know without fearing consequence. So that's actually Absolutely. So I totally agree with that philosophy. Now, in terms of what I do in my classes, what I focus on and the way that I approach teaching is I focus primarily on comprehension. So a lot of the assessments that I give are comprehension based. Now, the way that I try to make it so that everybody is guaranteed to be successful is, in addition to all the stuff we do in the classroom, making everything understood, understandable, keeping in contact with your kids and making sure that you know where they're at, what they're understanding, what they're not understanding. But when you've chosen that moment to assess, what I like to do is give them a huge range of choices of things that they can do to demonstrate their understanding. Nice. So one thing I like to do is a thing called a choice board, where say we read something or have a conversation about something, whatever it is, the end result always ends up being something, typically something that's readable, some chunk of text we either created or got from somewhere. So what I'll do is I'll say, all right, so we've read this, we understand it. So what I just want you to do is I want you to pick from a variety of options how it is that you want to show me what it is that you understand. So, for example, like it might be, what's a good example? It might be write me 10 true or false questions in English about what happened in that story. All right. Or it could be make a drawing, make a piece of art that demonstrates your understanding. I will even let people just simply translate if that's the kind of kid that they are and they like that sort of thing. Again, it can be adding on to a story. It can be even just writing an English summary of a story. I keep a wide variety of options available. You know, writing an alternate universe of it, anything of the sort, right? So the reason why I allow for such a huge variety of options is that all I care about is that they were able to understand the story. And the spoiler is that I already know they understand it. And now what they get to do is just pick a way that they feel most comfortable with showing that off, that they're how is they able to do it in the way they feel most comfortable. So during this time, they're still able to look at everything. They look at the story, it's right there in front of them. If they have questions, I'll answer the questions. I don't care. The whole point is that even in the assessments that I end up giving, again, as I mentioned in the earlier video, the goal is really just to stack successes.
Mhm.
So as I mentioned before, right, the only purpose of this is to make them feel good about what it is that they can do. And then the sneaky thing I put in there is that it's just another excuse for them to read the same thing again without
Mhm.
it feeling like they're reading it again. So the way that I make this work for everybody is I get rid of all the additional stuff, all the additional stressors, all the additional pressure. I just take all that out. Say, all right, here's some options. Show me what you understand, how you understand it, and the way that you do it. And to me, a drawing, stick figures of what happens in a story tells me everything that I need to know. And so that is how I managed to make my assessments accessible to all, because you get to choose your path to entry, as it were.
Nice. I like
That's my
that. That
overall philosophy.
very cool. I really like the choice board idea. I think one thing we both feel very strongly in, and that I hope our listeners will connect with, is choice is such an important part of it. Giving kids options, whether that be a myriad of different options or within one particular assessment, letting them choose which to answer.
Absolutely.
Give 12 sentences, pick 9, 15, pick 10, whatever the case may be. Just that safety net of knowing you can if you blank on a word, you can skip that one sentence and do the next one. That kind of thing can really help. If you're doing a translation assessment, giving them a couple of different translations to choose from that are comparable in structure, comparable in difficulty, have comparable glosses, comparable lengths, all that kind of stuff. Absolutely. And the last thing I'll say about that is I'm 99.999% sure you're familiar with this, but for any of our listeners, our viewers who aren't familiar with it, the draw 1, 2, 3, that is one of my very favorite assessments
on my choice board.
It's a great back pocket. It's my go-to. It's my emergency sub lesson plan is a draw 1, 2, 3. All that means is where the 1, 2, 3 comes from. I learned this from Bob Patrick. I'm not sure who the originator of it is, but for me, it's Bob. That's who I learned it from. The idea is after kids have read a story, they pick one scene from that story that they think is particularly interesting, impactful, memorable, whatever. They get to choose. They draw it. And then they choose 2 pieces of dialogue from that story and incorporate that into their drawing. And then at the very bottom, they write a 3-sentence summary of the scene they've drawn. That's, again, those parameters, 1, 2, 3, can help kids who are not necessarily prolific writers or who don't feel like they are. And I always tell kids if they want to do more, they can, but I don't want them to get so worried about writing every single word down. Some kids, God bless them, they will rewrite that whole story because they have a hard time like winnowing down what is important. And that is an important skill, like you said, is being able to summarize. So those parameters can help you reinforce some of those skills while also assessing their comprehension. And can they pick the most important meaningful parts of a text, or are they just kind of grabbing onto some of the most basic sentences? Like, where are they at? It's a good way to gauge how deeply they were able to understand the story.
Oh, totally. And that's what it's all about. We're trying to catch kids doing stuff right. We're not trying to catch them doing stuff wrong. We care about what they can do, not so concerned with what they can't. This is all about them being able to show off what it is that they can do. And everything that we do is to make sure that that happens. So
Absolutely.
that is our time for today. But don't worry, we got one more video coming at you, which is the one I know that you're really anxious to get to, is what about grading? How do I grade in a way that is equitable, in a way that works for everybody? Well, you're going to have to stay tuned, and you're going to have to watch the next video to find that out. So once again, I'm John Bracey, and
I'm
you
Jenn
are...
Jarnigan. Jenn Jarnigan.
That's right, the Jenn Jarnigan. See you in the next video. Take care.
Bye.